and welcome to this seminar on singleness and dating in church. Mainly on singleness in church. Don't worry, if you're not into dating, I won't push you into anything, but we will talk about it a little bit. But we will mainly talk about singleness in church because of my newest book with a similar title. My name is Aukelien van Abbema. It's a difficult Dutch name. You can't read it on here, but you can read it on the screen. I'm from the Netherlands, currently living in the UK for about 3 years now with my husband, who has a job here in Ashford in Kent. And I work as a psychologist in the Netherlands in a Christian mental health care institution. And I've been doing lots and lots of work over the past few weeks, getting everyone to transfer to the way I already work, which is through video calling my clients. So I'm sure this whole lockdown COVID thing has a lot of impact on all of you. And the reason we're sitting here and you're sitting there watching me doing this talk is that we are in lockdown. But I hope that won't distract too much from the message I'm hoping to have for you today. Because we are to be talking about singleness in church because it's such an important topic and it's often so overlooked. Singles are so overlooked in church and also in conferences. They don't get the attention I feel they deserve. And it's a different kind of attention everyone needs as well. So there's a lot to be said about this topic, much more than we can do in 30 minutes, but we'll try and do our very best. I studied psychology. I also studied philosophy. I'm a specialized couples counselor, but I focus mainly on counseling single people. And I'm the author of 4 books. One of them is Dare to Date, which has been out for 3 years now. Also translated in Hungarian and also available in Dutch, but I'm sure most of you won't speak Dutch. So that's not very helpful to you. But Dare to Date is also there. And then Singleness in Church. And Singleness in Church has come about 12 years ago when I found myself single in my own church, a big international church in Amsterdam. Lots and lots of single people, no dating happening, and no one talked about singleness, which made me feel very, very lonely. I felt like I was the only one struggling with this issue of singleness. And I felt like I wasn't allowed to struggle because I was happy. I had friends, I had a job, I had a home. I was doing well, and I felt like singleness was only an issue if you were not doing well. And yet I found myself longing for a relationship. Now I'm sure for you, some of you will be in a similar situation. Others will be divorced, maybe having already had a relationship or had multiple relationships. Some of you will never have had a relationship before in your life. You're longing for one, but you don't know how to get there. And there will be a few of you who are very happy to be and stay single. Now, you will be in the minority, I suspect, but we don't talk a lot about this. We don't talk a lot about our need for dating or our need for a relationship or a longing for a relationship. So I want to address both how to be happy as a single and thriving as a single, which I absolutely believe you can be, and how to create in church a place for happy, thriving singles, which I also believe can be done, and how to deal with this longing for a relationship that most of us have, and which is a healthy, God-given longing. So I want to do a bit of both, which is always a bit of a juggle, because when I talk too much about being happy and thriving as singles, I get people who say, yeah, but seriously, we should be talking about relationships. And when I talk too much about dating and relationships, I get the people who say, yeah, but seriously, there's nothing wrong with singleness. So both people are right. There's absolutely nothing wrong with singleness. Don't let anyone ever tell you there is. But as human beings, we're created for connection. And in this time of lockdown, you can feel that more intense maybe than you would previously have. If you're the type of person that usually fills your diary with social meetings, with dinner dates, with friends, hangouts, all kinds of things. And you just go to the office and have a very active social life, then you will feel this lockdown much more than when you're more introverted and you don't mind sitting at home anyway. And even from home, there's a lot of connection possible, of course. I don't know how it's with you, but my WhatsApp groups go ding, 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 ever since this whole lockdown started, and Facebook seems to be exploding with messages, as does Instagram. So it's not that we're not connected anymore, but it's a different way of connecting than normally, of course. So, about today, what I want to talk about is the facts and figures of being single. So there's a lot to be said about that. How we as singles nowadays feel. I say we, although I'm married now, I still feel that part of me feels how it is to be single, and I speak to a lot of single clients every week. So I still feel connected to both groups, actually, which is an interesting dynamic. I will talk about the Old Testament and dating and the New Testament and dating and the differences between those two, because there's a lot to be said about that as well. And I will talk about singleness in church and how to address that in a way that's actually helpful to everyone. So, facts and figures. It's estimated that a third up to 40% of today's adults are single or are not in, and that's a different statistic, not living together with a partner, with a significant other. That's a lot of people. That's almost half of the population being single or considering themselves not in a steady relationship. And that's a figure that isn't often reflected in churches, which worries me. I ask pastors about this, and sometimes pastors say to me, yeah, that's because we do marriage so well that everyone is married in our church. And I say to them, seriously? Do you think maybe you've lost a few singles here and there along the way? Because that's what I believe happens, especially guys tell me when they're over 25 and still single or again single, they don't feel as welcome and accepted in church. So they stay away, which is worrying, and which leaves us with the statistics of that there's only one single guy for every 2 to 3 single women in church. And it's an imbalance you feel in a lot of church single meetings. So that's a very real statistic to single women out there. A lot of them tell me, oh, I am looking for someone, but they're just not there. I go to this Friday night drinks thing, and there's loads and loads of guys there, loads and loads of girls there, and no guys. And the guys that are there hang out together and don't interact. So that's actually 2 issues there. One is the lack of numbers, the amount of guys being there, and 2 is the lack of interaction and connection really happening. So those are some facts for you. And if you live in a more rural, small town and go to a smaller church, you will feel that much more than when you're in a big city like London. Because in London, the numbers will be more even, like they were for me in Amsterdam and in a lot of big cities. So that's one fact. And the other one is that 98% of singles will actually tell you they'd rather be in a dating relationship, which doesn't mean they are unhappy. It doesn't mean they don't like being single. It doesn't mean it's not their thing or anything like that. It just means that if they were given a choice, and the choice was A, being single, or B, being in a happy, thriving marriage even, they would choose the marriage. And you see that now in the younger generation a lot, that they are much more clear about that than my generation. I'm 38, and in my generation it's much more of a conflicted issue. You're not to say that you don't like being single. You're not to say that you'd rather be married. It's better to stay somewhere in between. Don't admit you're completely single, never seeing anyone, never dating, because that would be a bit sad. Don't admit you'd rather be in a committed relationship, because that would be binding yourself and giving up freedom. But find yourself in this middle space and you're sort of cool. And that's where society wants you to be, at least. Which is a very unhealthy dynamics when you think about it. Because if you stay there, sure, you can be there from 20 to 25 maybe. But if you're still there at 35, at 45, at 55, and I know people who are, then it becomes an issue. Because then it's more about maturing and making choices, owning your choices. And a lot of those people will tell me, no, eventually I do want to be in a relationship. I spoke to someone the other day and she said, yeah, she was nearly 40. I do want a marriage and kids, but, you know, I'm having fun dating. I said to her, you're almost 40. I hate to break it to you, but you don't have forever anymore. You hardly have any time left if you want to have children. And that's not just for you. Guys, their fertility also goes down. Just to be clear on this topic. Yes, there are exceptions to that rule, but in general, if you want to start a family, you better start it around 30 than around 40, or even before 30, if you manage to do that. So there's the given of people who would rather be in a relationship, but don't, on the short term, don't make the choices needed to go for that relationship, which will backfire for them at some point. So that's today's single. And there's a lot of dynamics around that to discuss. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Into the Wild. I found it a really sad movie. And this guy goes through these phases, right? He's out there looking for himself, and he goes further and further into the north of America, into Alaska, looking for true freedom, true nature. And his first conclusion is you don't need human relationships to be happy. God has placed it all around us, which sounds really cool, right? It sounds really... yeah, you don't need human relationships. There's so much beauty in nature, and you can just go out and feel fulfilled in your soul. Until, and I won't tell you completely how it ends, but until further along in his journey, he gets confronted with himself and he starts to feel lonely. Because the further away he is from society, the less distraction he has to his loneliness. And this is what we do, right? We distract ourselves from our loneliness all the time. That's how we're wired to be. That's why we fill our agendas with dinner dates, with friends, with drinks, with movies, with watching lots of Netflix when we're home alone. We are wired to numb the pain of feeling alone, especially when we're single. This is what we are getting really good at usually. And this is what society also offers us nowadays through Netflix, through an endless stream of input. So we numb the pain of being alone, but therefore we miss out on something, which is a God-given longing for connection. And so the conclusion of the guy Into the Wild in the movie, in the end, is happiness is only real when shared, which is a very different conclusion than the one he came to at the beginning. Happiness is only real when shared, and this is what we feel when we feel lonely, that we want someone to share our lives with. And actually, I think in churches we've been doing this weird thing of, on the one hand, idolizing marriage and making it sort of if you achieve that, especially marriage with kids, and you've achieved it, then you've came to the highest ranks of church, which is icky, if you ask me. But on the other hand, what we do is we idolize singleness in a different way, saying, oh, you just have to be content in God. You have to be so content in God that if He chooses to give you a partner, that will happen when you are content enough. And that is nowhere in the Bible. That's completely over spiritualizing singleness in a very unhealthy way, because it gives single people the message that they should just suppress their feeling, their need for relationship, that they should suppress their wanting, their longing for a relationship, because it will be a sign of not being content enough in God, not being spiritual enough, not being good enough. Which I think is theologically speaking, highly, highly debatable. Now, I'm not a theologian, and I know it doesn't come from absolutely nowhere. And sure enough, if you look for God, he will fulfill you. But I also believe God wired us to be connected to other people. So he will tell us, it's not just about me, it's also about you and the people around you. Now, this over-spiritualization isn't helped by the reality of relationships, right? When you look at the statistics for divorce, when most people go in their own experience, they will tell you it's not a happy place to be. A relationship, it's difficult, it's complicated, it's heartbreaking, it's aching, I've been hurt in the past, or my parents, I've seen them go through a horrible marriage, hurting each other. So there's a lot of reasons people have to not be very excited about being single and about being in a relationship, or about longing for a relationship. And that's completely understandable. The reality of relationships is, yes, it is hard. And I think if the devil is out there to get us in relationships, then you feel that. And you see that in the divorce rates. Now, as a couples counsellor, I also know that the divorce rates are coming from a generation, mainly, of people seeing divorce as an option to get out of their issues, the relationship issues. But what happens usually in the next relationship they have, they will come across the same issues. Things don't really change unless they change. So they bring their issues into the next relationship, and sure enough, the first few months or even years will be happy and feel different. But usually in the new relationship, they come to a point where yet again they fall into the same patterns of communication that are not helpful. There's a lot to be said about that as well. I won't bother you with that as much. But yes, relationships, reality is hard, but the good news is we also know how to fix relationships issues better than ever. I'm a big fan of Sue Johnson's work. She wrote the book Hold Me Tight. And the way she teaches couples counselors to address relational issues is so helpful to so many people. That you also have to know that if you are in a terrible relationship, or you find yourself in one years to come, there will be a lot that can be done to help you. But we've not learned how to look at relationships in that way anymore. When you look at the time of our grandparents, they just got on with it. Divorce was not an option. So they found a way to reconnect, and they did. Most of them did. And it's about options. It's about feeling like you have an exit or not. And if you consider divorce a proper exit out of a complicated marriage, your mind will go there, and you will be less inclined to fix the issues you have in your relationship. And this is also a thing of our day and age, I think, that we feel like connecting should be easy. Single people tell me all the time, well, I was on this date, I didn't feel it, wasn't happening, so no, there's no second date for us. And sometimes that can be valid and okay, and sometimes I have to say to them, seriously, you should give this another chance, because you're now looking at your own list of expectations, you're just checking boxes here, and if there's not enough boxes checked, you're moving on. Whereas true relationships, that's not how you start a friendship, so why would you start a relationship like that? it doesn't make sense. You just go into it more open-minded, like you would go into a friendship, see where things lead you, but also allow things to grow. We have such a fixed mindset when it comes to relationships, and that's due to Hollywood, I'm quite sure. Hollywood has ruined us a bit with Jerry Maguire and Notting Hill and whatever you have. It has given us the image that good relationships are there from the start, from the get-go. And it has undermined this whole idea that's much more healthy and much more true, actually, that relationships grow. And when you look at spring around you, you can see things don't just stand there. I mean, flowers don't just burst out of the ground. They grow. And first you see tiny, teensy green bits, and then it goes bigger and bigger and bigger every day. But you have to allow it time to grow. And we know this is true for nature, but this is also true for relationship. Now, moving on to the Bible and dating. And there's a lot to be said about that as well. I have written 2 chapters in my book, one about the Old Testament and dating. Lots of fascinating stories about people meeting other people at the well. Mind you, find a well, or you're not allowed to go out now. Okay, go online, which is a proper substitution for a modern day well, and meet people there. There are lots of fascinating stories. And then the New Testament, lots of different stories. Because what happens in the Bible is quite interesting. There's a completely different approach to relationships in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, mind you, people had to procreate because they were waiting for the Redeemer, for the Messiah that was promised to them. And in order for the Messiah to be born, people needed to marry and have children. It was quite as simple as that. So marriage and children in the Old Testament was foundational to society. It was not an option not to marry. As a woman, you wouldn't even be allowed anything at all when you didn't have a husband. So being married in the Old Testament is a very foundational thing. And I feel in church we sometimes are a bit stuck in the Old Testament way of thinking about marriage and relationships. Because what happens in the New Testament, when Jesus has actually arrived and the Messiah is there, that's where Paul comes in, right? 1 Corinthians 7, you all know this, you love this. It's better to be single. Well, is it? That's debatable, but what Paul is saying is revolutionary at a time. You can't underestimate how revolutionary that was. Paul is saying to an entire society with thousands of years of history of people getting married and having children, it is not needed to be married and have children to be a full member of the kingdom of God. That's what he's saying. And in this day and age, namely people being killed off daily on the basis of being Christian, so people seeing their spouse and their children killed off because of being Christian, in this day and age, I wouldn't recommend it to all of you to go through that heartbreak, to have that possibility of actually being killed for faith and seeing your loved ones killed for faith. That's what Paul is saying. But that's what we are quoting in our churches to single people. Why? Why would you quote that to single people now? We don't live in such a dangerous place. Most of us don't, especially not here in the West. Although today with COVID, it might feel slightly different, but that's absolutely not for any reason about us being Christians. So Paul is quoted, I think, to keep singles sort of calm and have them shut up about A, their annoyance about the way marriage is treated in church, and B, about their lack of finding a spouse. So I think in the New Testament, what Jesus is showing himself when he sits down with the woman at the well, he is saying, you know what, this is all about connecting. I am all about connecting. And whether you're in a marriage or not, I don't really care. You're not better in a marriage or better when you're single. Those are choices you have to make yourself. That's actually what he says to the woman at the well. You know what to do. You know what to do about this whole relationship situation you're in. And I think that's what Jesus says to us today. You know what to do. Do you want to be dating? Go and date and be blessed. Do you want to be single? Go, be single, be blessed. I think it's very important to hear Jesus talking to us today about this. But I think in the basis, what Jesus is saying is take responsibility for your own relationship status. Take responsibility for your marriage if you're married, for your singleness if you're single, for wanting to date if that's what you want, going from A to B. So that's a profound message. I think Jesus takes this far more seriously than we do take ourselves seriously. So let that sink in for a bit. And then finally, themes to discuss in your church. Because I've been talking a lot about what is going on in churches as far as I can see that. This is what I hear from a lot of you out there. My church does not address this at all. They don't even say I should be doing this or that. They're just not talking about singleness. They're only talking about marriage and children. All the examples my pastor gives are about marriage and children. All the examples I hear about God's love for us is how a husband loves his wife, for example. And that's painful. And that's all pastors who I address it with tell me they don't want to be like that. They don't want to exclude single people, but they just don't know how to include them. And this is where you all come in, because you know how you want to be included. And it will be different for each and every one of you. But I think the more perspectives your pastor has on this, the better. And the more you can cooperate on this issue, the better. And the more singleness can become a normal part of daily life in church as well, the better. So there's a lot to discuss. I actually have 10 tips at the end of my book. And one of them is base your church on friendship and broaden your definition of family. I believe we're called to be family, and that family is much more than the nuclear family as we know it today. And that family is a much broader thing. So as community, I believe we're called to live together, to work together, to love together, and to learn from each other and to be with each other. I have some single friends who we share a life with, which is brilliant because they have a broader horizon than I have sometimes when I'm focused on my children all day long. And I love hearing their stories. And they love just being here and cuddling my children when that's allowed again. So to be family together is actually of so much more value than to just be family on our own everywhere. And be proactive in that. Be open. I know it's not a real British quality always to be very proactive, but I know you also can. You have it in you. Be proactive about what you want. Don't be demanding or whining, but just be proactive. This is what I would like to see in our church. This is how I would like things to change. And yes, that will be uncomfortable sometimes. And that will feel a bit vulnerable. But you know what? If you feel vulnerable, that's actually usually a good feeling. It means something is changing. And you're being real and honest and open about something that's really important to you. So I would like to encourage you to start this conversation wherever you are. Both on singleness and on dating and the questions you have in both areas. Lastly, to listen is to love. And I think it couldn't be more true at any time than now. To listen is to love. I don't know about you, but I'm doing loads and loads of video calls and Zoom calls with friends, with family, with clients, with colleagues. And still, the most important thing I can do, and it feels a bit odd to say this after 30 minutes of talking, but it's to listen. To listen intently and to love the people around me. Being listened to is so close to being loved that the average person cannot tell the difference. This is very true in dating, in singleness, in churches, everywhere. So I want to encourage you to listen to the people around you, to love them, and to also make your own voice heard. And I want to leave you with a challenge. Think about, pray about, journal about, where does God meet you in your singleness? And is there anything He wants you to know today or this week about the choices you make? Is there anything He wants you to ponder on, to reflect upon, or to change in the choices you make being single this week? So that's my challenge for you. I pray that you will be blessed in this journey and that you will feel blessed by this talk. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I'd be happy to help if I can. So God bless and see you all later.